in the cybersecurity space. And in the second bit, I'll share a link with you so that you can train your own agents and cyber defense agents, and you can play with it during the workshop and afterwards as well. Okay, so to be able to do that, it's definitely useful to, I'm going to do kind of a walkthrough, an honest walkthrough as to what has worked so far with regards to AI in cyber defense and what hasn't. And based on this, then we can talk about extensions and where the thing should or may be going in the future. So I'm a research scientist at the Alan Turing Institute. I do AI for cyber defense. I lead a team there on that works exactly at the intersection of these two areas, so open cybersecurity problems and machine learning. And this is what we hope that AI is going to do for cybersecurity and cyber defense, like change everything for the best, make sense of the mess and kind of tidy things up. However, it's been a while since generative models and models in general have been around. And from the first minute, people said, oh, okay, maybe now that we have ChatGPT, malware soon won't be a problem. Or, well, can I fully delegate the cyber defense operations of my organization to a model, and now I don't have to pay anyone and it's going to do everything perfectly? The answer to those first two questions is definitely not. So we're not there yet, and it's interesting why that's the case. So we're going to be discussing this in a little bit. Software vulnerabilities are definitely still a problem, and while there are there's a lot of hard-coded automation in detecting them, especially with outdated versions, and GitHub is getting smarter. So there is some progress there, but most of the fixing is still done by humans. And definitely with regards to incident response and investigation, you have some sort of machine learning models that's already questionable, providing alerts, but then you have a human investigating. On the bright side, adversaries don't seem to be using AI to hack autonomously at enormous scale 24/7. So at least there is like something good about not fully uptaking AI in cybersecurity, at least yet. Okay, so the agenda for today looks like those three steps plus the hands-on workshop I've prepared for the second half. But the idea is we will evaluate the current state of AI in security, identify the challenges that are actually preventing progress, and we'll discuss the future directions to have an impact. Along the way, we'll get into some rabbit holes, some interesting fun facts. Okay, so let's get started. One thing I wanted to mention, in case someone is very interested in offense or defense, or some people get worried that, well, but if we use AI to do something seemingly offensive, now we are unlocking opportunities for adversaries. This is not always the case. There are some cases that, yeah, this is happening, but in most cases, knowledge is useful, knowledge helps. So if you have a pipeline, which we will see later, that detects vulnerabilities in software and fixes them and exploits them and then fixes them, this is actually a good thing because people can use them to preemptively fix their bugs in their programs before adversaries take control and exploit them. Okay, so this slide refers to the first half of the talk. We'll later then get more into the weeds and we'll have to define which flavor of AI we're referring to. But for the biggest part, and if you are not a technical person, or you are a technical person but you don't know a lot about machine learning, you will get by just by thinking of a black box that takes an input and provides an output, and the input can be in the form of data from a specific domain. In this case, this data is cybersecurity related, but it doesn't need to be. The good thing that AI did compared to previous solutions is that if you give it more data and more compute, it seems to be doing better. And by better, we mean several things. We mean also performance, but generalizability, the ability of the model to solve tasks that were not strictly the tasks it was trained on, is very important, because now it can do things that you might not have data for, but you wanted to delegate to the model. And the other thing with models is that by providing data, the hope is that you won't need human expert priors, which was the case in a lot of attempts to use machine learning in pipelines before. There's nothing wrong with expert priors. It's just that it's time consuming and you end up with a lot of hard-coded knowledge so that you can help the model. So we're transitioning towards a kind of a space or an era where you don't provide too much of this, maybe some light scaffolding, and then the model has enough knowledge to kind of and context to make relevant decisions. Okay, so the landscape in terms of cybersecurity is that machine learning models, and you can think of ChatGPT in this case as well, are definitely used for information gathering and reconnaissance for attacks. This is purely offensive use. We know that, and I'll refer to specific incidents in a minute. We know that it is useful in penetration testing, and there are a number of companies looking in this direction, trying to automate penetration testing using models. And this is great because typically penetration testing is rather expensive if you want a quality audit, high quality audit. So if we could democratize it using models, bringing the cost lower, then it means that smaller organizations might be able to get access to this kind of services, which would be great. Then vulnerability discovery, which is something I touched on earlier, and I have a slide again in a minute. Very important. It's definitely happening. Malware, yes, but we'll see. And then you have fraud and phishing, which is definitely one of the first things adversaries tried. Okay, so I said reconnaissance. This is from OpenAI's report from October. October is now light years away. Things changed a lot since most large language model providers now have a dedicated team studying incidents. I never thought that, for example, OpenAI would be a provider of threat intelligence, but because their models are, and other large vendors, but because these models are so useful for debugging and learning about vulnerabilities and how systems work, if you're an adversary, you want to use them, of course, for malicious purposes. So they're investigating anomaly detection, evasion, and how they could script things to get around firewalls, for example. So this is known. They're using it for that. In parallel, the same team seems to have tried to spearfish OpenAI employees. That's not their main thing, but it was interesting because they were mentioned in tandem in that report. Now you also have cyber avengers. They seem to be Iranian affiliated. They use those models to, again, same source, that report. They use those models to conduct research into programmable logic controllers. If you don't know what PLCs are, don't worry. PLCs are essentially they bridge the physical and the cyber. So these are devices that used to feature relays. So you can think of PLCs as the device that might take a signal over the internet to open a water dam, or if you have a digital substation for electricity, it might control some switches there. The interesting bit is that there is usually they're controlled from the cyberspace. I don't want to say the internet, because many times those systems are air-gapped, or they're accessed only through VPNs, so not necessarily the open internet. But then whatever commands are coming from the cyberspace translate into the physical world, and you understand that this is a prime target for adversaries, because this is where critical national infrastructure lives. So this is from OpenAI's system card for O1. O1 is now a few months old. And in fact, the later version updated this graph, but we can already see that in capture the flag challenges, the model did decently well. It did about half. Now, the updated version of this report shows that also in the moderate and higher complexity tasks, which here are pretty low, the model did well. This is a fun fact. It's not necessarily actionable information, but something fun is that in the original version of the report, which is no longer accessible from their website, they say that the model did manage to solve some professional but level capture the flag competition challenges, but it couldn't solve the moderate level ones, which is very puzzling. But then if you look more carefully, they say that for the professional level, it simply found a way to cut corners. So it didn't actually solve the challenges. It just found easier ways to get around them that the challenge designers hadn't thought of. I forgot to mention that if you're not familiar with capture the flag challenges, it's simply challenges you have to solve as part of a hacking competition. They usually can involve fairly basic hacking skills up to very complicated ones. The hope there is that they more or less train you up to penetration testing for the real world. This is not always the case, but it's probably one of the best things we have to upskill for that. So the model is doing good in capture the flag challenges means something. It doesn't necessarily mean that this translates in one-to-one in real-world capabilities, but it is useful. Okay, so now with regards to penetration testing, what we have here is I thought it was more interesting to see how things develop over the months. So we have Cybench, which is one of the benchmarks measuring capabilities of models, several models over time on capture the flag challenges exclusively. You see that there is an improvement, although there is also some variation, which is hard to explain why O1 is not doing better than Sonnet if it came out later. But you equally see that OpenAI's reports themselves from May to September have improved, and now they've released another one from DeepSeek, which I didn't have time to include in this graph, but you can, it is doing even better. Okay, so to make this more concrete, if that's something you want to get into, so penetration testing using generative models, you should definitely look into what's called Pen Test GPT. It used to have 7K stars on GitHub. I think now they're approaching 8 or maybe a bit more. So right now it can do easy to moderate tasks, and the way it works is the following. There is a human expert, which can be you, and you provide a penetration testing goal. This can be the capture the flag challenge you want the model to solve. And then the whole the core of the system is this interactive loop where the model tries a solution, performs some operations in response to that solution that it thought of. These actions are then passed on to the testing environment, and then the model gets back the outputs of what it decided to do. And this loop, hopefully over time, will lead the model to solving the challenge. Now, what they did in the original paper is they had human experts, and in this kind of between the model and the environment, and between the outputs of the environment and the model. And the case there is that the human expert can provide a little bit more context or can help the model with formatting. Sometimes models mess up JSON. So if there is a JSON output that's required, it might try to produce flawless JSON, but there's sometimes a kind of a tiny syntactic error. And that's the downside of doing security research with models, is that in security exploits, you need to be very precise. So if you are one bit off, that might be enough for the exploit not to work. In this case, it was more than 1 bit off. It's like some syntactic mistake in JSON. So having a human there helps, but obviously fully autonomous pipelines are more exciting and more interesting, and that's what we hope to go towards. Okay, I spoke about vulnerability discovery. This is how such a pipeline in software. This is how such a pipeline will look like. So you have your code, usually on some version control repository. So think of GitHub, for example. And then you decide to commit and push your code on your repository. So then you have your CI/CD pipeline that builds, has unit tests, integration tests, and all those things. And the hope there is that as part of the CI/CD pipeline, you have a model that is actually testing your code for vulnerabilities and providing enough information and proof to you that something bad exists if it claims that this is the case. And as a next step, it obviously tries to fix it for you, which would be great if you could write code and then have a highly capable model, essentially provide high confidence assurance that the code doesn't introduce any software vulnerabilities. If you're into the blockchain world, writing smart contracts is probably one activity that would benefit quite a lot from having this sort of testing, because if you've tried to get your smart contract audited, you'll know it's a very, very expensive process, and even if you have the money, it takes months to find someone reputable to do it for you. So we have released a report on the current state of vulnerability discovery, and you can see that this is the number of articles, like high quality articles published over the years. You can see things are heating up, and now people are more and more papers include language models. So if you want to read more about it, you can follow the link there, and there's a full list of papers. You'll find it there. The title says "Closing the Gap for Automated Software Vulnerability Discovery." As I said, the hope there is that the model can do exploitation and then patching, exploitation to prove to you that there is indeed a vulnerability it's claimed to be. This is exactly the concept in the AICC cyber competition, the AI Cyber Challenge. This is led by DARPA in the US, and it's still ongoing. My team participated last summer. It's great because we ended up with a complete pipeline that detects, exploits, and patches vulnerabilities. So that's something you want to play. I think they've now open sourced the competition. You can find it on their website. If you look up AIXC, you'll find them fairly easily. We turned this into a benchmark to see how well models were doing, and we've released this as a paper as well. We saw a massive improvement between May and September, with 0.1 doing almost more, 3 times better than 4.0, which is incredible. And now internally, I can tell you, we've been playing with 0.3, and it's even better. So a lot of progress in that space. This is how our solution works, but it's similar to what I presented earlier with regards to the feedback loop for the Pentest GPT. So I don't want to bore you too much by presenting a similar thing. The only thing to mention here is that you can use a technique called reflection, where you ask the model to intentionally reflect on its previous responses and what came out of it. And this seems to be helping in improving the results quite a lot. Now, I know I said that, well, security is dual use. And if you design an offense pipeline, you can use it to detect your vulnerabilities earlier. This is true, and this is the best we can do, but there is a risk we need to acknowledge. And this has to do with the fact that patching and fixing vulnerabilities on live systems is slower than exploiting them. And by this, I mean, there was a vulnerability back in 2014, nothing to do with AI, but it was a vulnerability affecting OpenSSL, which is a cryptographic library used in lots of systems, even today. So The vulnerability was detecting, and whoever found it used responsible disclosure. So a patch was released before the vulnerability was exploited in the wild. So if you were managing a server, you did have a patch you could apply and fix your devices immediately. Unfortunately, it took us several years to see a substantial decrease in the number of devices that are vulnerable. So this means that an adversary could very easily scale up a massive exploitation effort, controlling thousands of devices over a very small period of time. So this is something we can't easily get around, because obviously if you have something in production that's working, security is a concern, but at the same time, deploying the patch is a slow process. You need to make sure that your service will still be operational, which leads to lots of latencies. For example, you might remember last year CrowdStrike had an incident and lots of systems went offline. This is why patching services is slow. One of the reasons, at least, because you can see that there are still, even today, actually, some lingering devices, and these are probably low value devices that no one really cares about, and they're still out there. Okay, I also mentioned malware, and malware is another space offensive uses of AI have found application in. So far, what they use AI to do is essentially as a coding assistant and debugging and fixing problems. So what you would use it if you were building a legitimate app. It's just an assistant. They acknowledge it's useful. Again, from the same OpenAI report, there are more since. And the most commonly used is basically using AI to for fraud or to phish people and trick them with deep fakes or emails generated en masse to send money or share their passwords. So to kind of provide an overview, reconnaissance definitely, penetration testing doing well, vulnerability discovery yes, but not yet in production so much. Malware creation, yes, but so, right? It's more of a coding assistant. It's not that specific to malware. Malware detection, generative models. I know lots of companies are looking into it. I haven't seen something that convinced me that, this is really a generative model behind the product, and you couldn't do it in any other way. Fraud and phishing definitely used. So that was a prediction from February 2024, so a year ago. I think this was from NCC. I think they were mostly right, especially since they didn't specify the timelines, because I have to say that the timelines have decreased or shrunk quite a lot in the past year. Things are moving fast. All right, so how can we identify the challenges hindering progress? Let's start by things that are not challenges. The models are good with human languages, which means that they can process manuals or protocol documentation standards, even log files. So we've got this good thing going for us, which is great. They're also good with source code, so they can read, write code. This is a really good basis to build on. And we also have in security lots of data. They're noisy in many cases, but we have lots of data, and the models, at least in the pre-training stage, they don't necessarily need high precision data, but they need a lot. The challenges are that cybersecurity is still a niche. So lots of people care about security, but it's not such a mainstream use case, regardless of the importance of having secure systems. So fewer research goes into how models can be deployed for security use cases. For example, in malware detection, we haven't had breakthroughs that would make me really excited for a number of years. Although lots of marketing material claims to be the case, I think we're still not that far from where we started. And I actually think that what I've seen so far is not really game changing. And I think we're somewhere in version 4, and I don't think this will make it to the final version ever. We need a kind of a paradigm shift for this to happen. Models are on their own pretty not that great in strategic planning. That takes several steps, and this is a necessary this is necessary for cybersecurity. Even if you do capture the flag, you need to kind of link up several steps of exploitation or reconnaissance to be able to kind of compile a proper attack strategy. Now, with deep research, I don't know if you've tried it, things have been improving, but the use case is very different to cybersecurity, right? It's like literature review and piecing together bits of information from the internet. To kind of drive the point of planning, this is another benchmark, and they try to see how complicated tasks, how complicated were the tasks models could solve, and to measure the complexity, they did a smart thing. They measured the time human experts would take to solve those tasks. And it turns out models could solve tasks that would take up to 11 minutes. And even then it was kind of a bit on and off. But this is where the limit is. And people have been trying lots of things to push it past this. But it is an inherent limitation, and we hope to improve with reinforcement learning and things we're going to talk about in a minute. So, as I said, reinforcement learning is a different machine learning paradigm. It had its moment of glory just before LLMs, though. So around 2017, maybe you've seen the documentary AlphaGo from DeepMind. This was very interesting. So reinforcement learning is not that great in making sense of noisy data or kind of messy human text or source code. What's really good at is coming up with complicated strategies that take many steps. And obviously, this is exactly what we need here. So there is this cyber environment we're going to be working on today. This is the workshop I promised at the beginning of the lecture. The idea here is that you have a corporate network with a number of hosts or computers of different value, and you have a defender which simulates a system administrator that is trying to keep the network clean. And what the defender does is they do preemptively scan the network with tools they have access to. They might, if they detect something, they might try to remove the adversary or the malware from a specific host. They might try to restore a host to a previous state that they know it's safe. They even deploy something called honeypots, which are services meant to trick adversaries to exploit them. So as a regular user, you will never notice a honeypot because it's a service you don't even know it's there. But as an adversary that lands into a network, usually the first thing you do is scan around you to see what's there. So you see the honeypot, and this looks a lot like a regular service, and in fact, they usually look like easily exploitable services that people could use. So this serves as a canary, essentially, that, oh, okay, someone is using that service or is trying to hack into that service. It must be an adversary because none of my regular users is using that. So this is, as I said, this is a simulation of a network. This gives us a information as to could RL come up with multi-step strategies to defend the network? And the answer is yes. Now we need to merge this with LLMs, and this is a big research question on how exactly you do that. Today in the workshop bit, we're going to focus on the on the multi-step strategy part and leave a bit aside the complexity. Can we handle the complexity of the world with regards to noisy data or alerts coming up? So finally, one big blocker is that a big part of security has to do with cryptography, and cryptography is maths. So there are efforts to kind of make machine learning models good in maths, and I hope they do better. But so far, the most capable models are not really proficient in maths in a way that is useful for cryptanalysis, for example. Okay, I'm going to briefly propose a direction towards I think we should be heading as a community, and hopefully this will give you some ideas as to things you can focus on next and do, and then we'll switch over to the coding part of today's session. So my observation is that it's not entirely certain that AI will drastically change security, but instead we might see smaller changes, which is a bit disappointing. I think in the limit, over several years, definitely we'll see a change. But what I was hoping for is that we will have a kind of a clearer direction to head towards. And I think part of the problem is that you don't know one unless you've seen one. So it's hard to, same way people had a hard time imagining how the car could change human societies and the way we do things when they had only seen a horse. I think we're in a kind of the same situation now, where we try to do exactly what we were doing before, just a little bit better using AI. So we probably need to move from this paradigm. And the way to move from this paradigm is something that core machine learning community did very well. So we need metrics to optimize for and good problems to try to solve. Now, how good problems look like? This is like, it's very easy to say that, but then if you try to think of one such problem, it's you may not come up with anything. So I'll give you an example. So in cybersecurity, in machine learning, when they started years ago, they had these computer vision problems at the core of the community. Then they also had this translation, human text translation tasks as well, which led to a lot of innovation. But one of their first data sets was MNIST, which you can see a screenshot of on the right here. So the task was very simple. It was, can you have a model that reads handwritten digits and tells you which digit it is? So what goes into this black box I mentioned earlier is one of those digits, not all of them, just one. And what comes out of the other side is essentially, you can think of it as having 10 LEDs, and one of them lights up depending on which digit that the model thinks this is. Now, this doesn't seem very practical, and even if you solve that, the question is like, okay, how are you going to use this in practice? It's pretty useless. And I think there was a use case of US Postal Service needing to read handwritten digits for the postcode or whatever. But in fact, what this did, I don't even know if this ended up being used by the US Postal Service. But what this did was it actually said lots of people tried to solve the same problem, developed lots of models, and it provided a good way to compare those models and identify which research directions work the best. So obviously now you can upload the photo on ChatGPT or another model, and it can even tell you what's in there and if it's funny, or come up, like, do a lot of things with images. But this is how it started, and having a kind of clear, robust metric to optimize for is very, very important. This is what I meant by good problems. I touched on this earlier. I think lots of people are circling the problem of combining language models with LLM. LLMs are good for short-term goals. Now people are trying to add reasoning and give them the space to kind of develop thoughts over longer horizons. I think this will be really game-changing if we got there. Reinforcement learning is pretty good at this. I like reinforcement learning, and I hope it's part of the solution, but it doesn't need to be. It could be that something else does way better, and we don't need the complexity reinforcement learning brings with it itself. This slide is a bit controversial. Not everyone will agree with me on that. I don't think we need human-machine teaming. In lots of applications, you'll see people saying, especially in the defense sector, they will say we need human-machine teaming, where the model plays well with human teams. Maybe, but I think that the end goal is that we offload a lot of the decisions to models. So having a human in the loop will only slow things down. I think human-machine teaming might become a thing briefly during some sort of transition period, but it's not going to last, because having an adversary that doesn't use human-machine teaming, because they will use full automation, is going to force your hand in terms of reaction speed, and the humans will be off the loop very soon. Same goes for explainability. If you try to go to some more traditional industries and tell them about AI, they will start talking about, but it's not explainable. It doesn't tell me how it reached the decision it did. Or how can I know that the explanation ChatGPT gives me is what actually went on in its head? Well, it's true for humans. Humans don't explain things. At least they will tell you, they will come up with an explanation, but it's not necessarily what went on in their head. And for example, if a primary school student, or probably now before that, asked you how do you recognize number 8, you would come up with an explanation, right, about how it looks like, maybe 2 circles on top of the other. But this is not how you recognize it when you see it. When you see one, you know one, but you don't know exactly how this is done in your head. With regards, this slide is definitely controversial because I see people typing, so it's probably got some reactions. With regards to reliability, people expect the models to be 100% right all the times. And in fact, they expect formal proofs that this is the case. I think this is unreasonable given that humans make mistakes all the time. So yes, there might be some pipelines if it has to do with launching nuclear weapons. You might want 100% robustness there, yes. But in most cases, which is where the vast majority of use cases lies, you can tolerate mistakes, and actually the existing pipelines that involve human employees and human operators account for mistakes. So if someone makes a mistake, someone else catches it later on downstream. So as long as the model doesn't fail catastrophically, and this we are now better at proving, and it's better than the worst human operator, it's probably okay to use it. This you'll find a lot of resistance in traditional industries. I think it's a distraction again. Okay, so hopefully this made some sense. I will share. You can follow the QR code if you want, but I will share a link on the chat so that you can use that as well. This is for the hands-on workshop part of the session. So I put the link on the chat. Hopefully you can see it. You'll have to clone it or copy it to another Colab notebook so that you can work with it. If you do that, you can run. Okay, so hopefully you can see this. So you will have to run the first. The first just fetches the source code from the repository. The repository is the Cyborg environment I mentioned earlier. This is kind of a network defense environment. So we will be training what's called a blue agent, which is a defensive agent against a hard-coded red adversary. So if you run this and then run the second field cell, will help you. So for me, this ran quickly because I have already installed stable baselines, which is a reinforcement learning package. But for you, it will take a little longer. So I'll use this time to respond to a couple of comments and maybe say a few more things. And please put comments on the chat if it's working or it's not working or if it's taking way too long. And if you're done, let me know so that then I'll start moving on to the rest of the fun things, rather than installing the packages. So reliability, Alan says reliability reminds me of years-long debate on autonomous driving. We tend to set a much higher bar for machines than humans. 100%, I totally agree. This is happening all the time. I think what will happen is in very conservative industries, it's just either the competition or the adversaries will force their hand and will essentially make them adopt whatever new technology is. The only downside is that whoever is very resistant to this change and very skeptical, coming up with kind of almost philosophical arguments, will be left behind. Now, this is not to say that we can be reckless with deploying AI to do everything. We definitely need to be careful, but getting stuck in philosophical arguments as to how much explainability do we need, rather than practically trying to solve problems as we've been doing the whole time in the past several hundred years, I don't think it's helpful. So, for example, the AI safety debate has been stuck for very long as to if we should pause the development of AI. Now, this is the latest thing. Pause the development of AI, or how can we guarantee that AI is not gonna eradicate humanity? I don't think this discussion is set on a practical basis, which means that it doesn't actually have a practical impact, which leads to AI safety problems because the development moves on and AI is not pausing. As you see now, several countries are developing large models and very capable ones. So we're losing on that front because we need to focus on what's practically feasible. How is the notebook going? Is it working for you? Can someone put something on the chat? Someone is typing. Great. So I'm glad. So Zach says that he just finished with stable baselines. This takes a little long, so I'm glad to hear it. Okay, downloading. That's great. Okay. So in the meantime, since this step has been completed, I will move on to. So as I said, we have a red and a blue agent, and we want to train a blue agent to defend against the red one. Now I have two hard-coded agents as an initial example to show you how the whole thing works, which is, this is a simplified cage environment. This is our environment, the cybersecurity environment I showed earlier. And we have two agents. One is the beeline agent, and the other one is the React Restore. React Restore refers to the strategy the blue agent is using, which has to do with when it detects some activity. Okay, someone moved on around the train blue. Yeah, we'll get there. But good to see that things are moving forward. So the React Restore, when it detects malicious activity on one of the hosts in the network, it intervenes and tries to restore it to a previously benign state. Restoring is not for free in this environment because the designers of the environment assume that, well, when you're restoring a computer in a previous state, this interferes with the day-to-day use of the computer. Maybe some files get lost, or at least you have to reboot it and wait for a long time. So you're losing some points if you do this too much. There are other ways to defend that don't involve restoring. The beeline agent is just trying to go from the, I wonder if it's probably best if I show you here. So the beeline agent is going from the one of the user hosts that it infects when it first accesses the network to the enterprise subnet, and then from there to the operational host or the operational server. sometimes to the operational hosts as well, but it doesn't need to be. There are some other types of agents that do exhibit this behavior, but in this case, the red agent beelines to the operational server, which is the final goal of the adversary. There is a whole storyline, a kind of story behind the design of the network and what was the end goal of the adversary, but I'm simplifying here. So if you go to the Cyber++ website, you'll see everything there. Okay, so this cell, all it does is it has those two hard-coded agents, no learning yet, play for 10 steps. So on every step, each of them get to choose an action. Obviously, the red agent will try to exploit and hack, and the blue agent will try to counter that. So we can run the cell and see what happens. So you see the on the first step. Well, actually, what I did here is I have a sleeper agent. So we could do this as well, but okay, let's stick with the plan and we'll see later. So the blue agent doesn't do anything because in the first step, because it waits to detect actions from the red agent before it restores the system, which means that in the first step, the red agent scans the second subnet, which is the first, like where the user hosts live. That's the second subnet, and then it picks one of the user computers and scans which services run there, and then decides to exploit that computer. And throughout this whole process, the blue agent doesn't do anything because there is nothing for them to see or react on. Now, on the fourth step, the blue agent realizes that, oh, wait, user one computer has been exploited, so I will restore it. The red agent doesn't know about it, so it tries to escalate their access, which means, yeah, I have exploited this computer, but now I want to be administrator, so I will escalate. But because the blue agent had reacted in time, or the last minute really, this action in fact fails. So then the blue agent sleeps again, the red agent exploits. So this keeps going on, and it somehow, because none of these two agents are very sophisticated, is a somewhat neat way to trap the blue agent, to the red agent there. Now, if we play it for multiple steps, you would see that they don't stay deadlocked on user one. And this is because occasionally actions fail, and for random reasons, this can happen on a regular computer too, because those systems are complicated. So the designers of the challenge, they have introduced some randomness in actions, so they can fail, and then the red agent will move on to another system, and the blue agent will have to play catch with them. So the next step is to train the blue agent. You can run this cell. I'm not going to run it because we hopefully have something here. Okay, I will run it, and hopefully it's not going to take very long. In the repository you downloaded, you should have the stored trained model, but this is not a big problem for us. I think it's going to take a couple of minutes. And in the meantime, I can explain a little bit about reinforcement learning training. In fact, I can open this file and show you that it's not that scary. So what we have here is you still need to, when you're, now we use a fixed red agent, which is the same as the beeline agent, and we want to train a blue agent against that. And this will be our AI cyber agent. We use a reinforcement learning algorithm called PPO. It uses an actor and a critic. It's a very established algorithm and rather stable. And what we do is we say, okay, in this environment called cage blue wrapper, you will train PPO, which is our model, for 100,000 time steps. Okay, so let's see how this goes. Yeah, this is a little bit slow. So my intention was to do 10,000 first and then increase it a little bit, and we'll see a difference. So you can change how your training works, for how long you train. Obviously, so what could happen when training is that either you don't train for long enough, so then the agent doesn't learn everything it could have learned if you let it play more with the environment. Or what would happen is at some point it has learned everything there is to learn, and then it will just keep playing games, but it won't improve. And how do we know if it's improving? The loss function here, which if you want to learn more about machine learning, maybe you know it already, but the loss function is very important for measuring the model's performance. There are other values here that would give us an indication as to what's going on with our training, but the loss function is good. And it's kind of normal to have some variation here. So you see that, well, it did 216. These are all pretty large numbers. 300 here. So this is already kind of an improvement. But you see now, if we test this agent. So testing is essentially, let me open the test file and you'll see it's not scary either. So testing is basically just setting the two agents play against each other. So again, the fixed red agent and let me see where we're loading the model. So we have our blue model. So we load it from a checkpoint file here. We load this model, and then when we want to select an action for the blue agent, we ask the model what we should do. This is the situation. Observations it corresponds to how the environment looks like. And then we take this step. So we do whatever the blue agent says. And then the environment moves on and on this way. So now we can see how well our agent did. You see the blue agent was taking actions here, analyzing users. Analyze is not a very useful action, so this hints a little bit that, okay, the agent is not doing great. So you see it got a score of -11, which means that it started losing points along the way. And if you let it play for longer, what most likely going to happen is that the red agent is going to get out of control, and the blue agent will start losing a lot more points. I will let this train now that we've done a full pass already. I will let this train for longer, for 100,000 steps, and see if our test then will look better. But in the meantime, I want to explain a little bit more about the reinforcement learning. So in reinforcement learning, the goal is to instead of use data to train, you interact with an environment, which means that you don't need to have data. You just need to have an environment that represents the problem you care about, and then you drop your agent in, along with something called the reward function that tells it how well it's doing, and you just let it play the game for as long as it wants or you want. And the hope is that at the end of it, it will learn something that makes sense. Now, what's interesting is that it doesn't need to be an environment that mimics the problem perfectly. So what lots of robotic companies do is they have a simulation of real-world physics that is very close to the real world. They do a first training of their models there, and then they move that model into a real robot and complete the training there, which of course gives them a massive speed up, because when you're training on your computer, you can simulate several environments in parallel, meaning the learning rate is much faster. And of course, you don't get to break the robots really badly as the agent, when it first starts interacting with the environment, it by definition does pretty badly. So how is this going? Let's see. So we've done 30,000 steps. Okay, we have 2 minutes left. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to run it for 20,000, which hopefully will give us a slightly better policy than the one we had before. Has anyone on the chat finished training for 100,000? And what happened with their testing? What was the final score? Was it better than the one we got here? Okay, so total reward 0 is good because lots of people finished, which is great. So total reward 0 is good because in security, you can only lose points by losing security and safety, I guess. So you will never get a reward better than 0. It's just that you can lose points by losing access to systems. Now, let's see how, so this is getting closer. I'm glad to hear it worked for you. You got 0. Let's see if by training for a fifth of the time you trained, I think you trained for 100,000, which was the original value. If we can get closer to that. Okay, so now we're testing. Let's see. All right, it wasn't 0, but it was better than what the previous agent did. So my agent still has some more to learn, whereas yours kind of maxed out the curriculum, and it's time to move on to a more complicated scenario. If you want to play with the agent you just trained, what you can do is you can try to test it on more steps. And because I think that we limited the training on 20 steps, if I remember correctly. So if you try to test it on more, you'll see that it's the policy starts being not that accurate. One final thing is that agents are great at exploiting environments. So if there is a minor flaw in your environment that would give the agent an unfair advantage, I guess same as humans, it would definitely use it to as much as they can. That's all for me. Thank you for joining. I hope it was fun.
Thank you, Vasilios. This was great. One question in the chat. I don't know if you've managed to see that in the questions area, which is about Neuralink.
Wait, I might be questions. No, I missed that one. Sorry, Adam. So the question says, what's your opinion on things like Neuralink and how that may possibly affect evolved machine learning in the future? Oh, that's a tough question. It's a little bit outside my area of expertise. So I'll be speaking more as a layperson rather than as an expert on this one. I'm glad someone is trying these kind of things. I definitely keep an eye on the ethics side, but I do remember when humanity tried crazy things and we had very rapid progress. So that's something to keep in mind as well. So it's very easy to overregulate everything and come up with great ethical arguments not to try anything new, and kind of essentially stall our progress. So I think there is a balance there. I don't know anything you might not know, like I'm an outsider in that space, but I see this as very promising. So I'm glad someone is trying. I hope they're doing it the right way.
Any other questions, everybody? You can see a lot of congratulations in the chat. Vasilios, it really was an amazing session. I think the practical, the theoretical section was great, but then the practical one elevated it even further. So thank you so much. This was fantastic.
Thank you.
I'm not seeing any other questions. So I think with that, we have to conclude the Generative AI Educate with Boba. This was the last session. I hope you enjoyed all the sessions so far. As you've seen, we've worked really hard with the Boba team to provide you with some amazing workshops with some interesting contents that you can engage with and learn a lot from. This workshop, as well as all the others, is recorded, and we'll make sure to make the recording available early on Monday. And as of right now, I'm wishing you all a great weekend ahead. And yeah, see you all soon in some of our other programs. Thank you again, Vasilios, and thank you everybody for joining.
Thank you. Bye. Feel free to reach. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.